David Roet, first of all, thank you so much for making some time for us here on Shalom TV.
I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David, the first question is, as far as you're concerned, as you said at the United Nations, where does the ceasefire stand at the moment?
Well, we'll have to see. Until now, we said always that a ceasefire, it seems, with Hamas is that we seize and they fire. But at this point, it's been almost 72 hours, maybe a few hours less, and the ceasefire this time has stood firm. But we get all kinds of words, and it's very, very difficult to know where it is now in Cairo. Israel has made all the commitments for a ceasefire. We actually withdrew all our forces from Gaza. So I'm hopeful that it will at least be, the time frame will be prolonged, but most importantly is that an agreement which will provide Israel with security is being made now.
I understand. You know, during the entire operation, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, seemed to suggest that the goal of Israel, the ultimate goal, was to demilitarize Gaza so that in the future, you know, there won't be any rockets falling down on Israeli heads, and there won't be tunnels bringing death squads into Israel. David, to what extent is that realistic? To what extent now do you think the Israeli government believes Hamas and Gaza can be demilitarized?
Well, you know, first of all, I must tell you, Mark, it's amazing. Saying the word demilitarization of Gaza in the UN sometimes seems to me as if I'm saying a four-letter word.
Yes.
It is like everybody refuses to even utter this, and they have many explanations of why this will never happen. I'm not naive. This is not something that will happen tomorrow, but I think it is a goal that we must stand for. Everybody speaks here in the United Nations about the root of the problem, which is basically a code word of attacking all kinds of issues about Israel, while we say the root of the problem is a terrorist organization taking control of Gaza, arming themselves to the teeth, and what we need to do is to demilitarize them. So I think it is it's an objective which is realistic. It will take time, and we first of all have to make sure that the world agrees to that. It can start by making sure no more weapons or material that can make weapons enter Gaza ever again. And later on, there are many ideas of how it could be done.
Okay. One of the things that I don't hear people explaining, and maybe you can, or maybe, David, there's just no answer. Who is going to demilitarize Gaza? Because at the moment, it seems to me that if Israel tried to do it all alone, it would face enormous criticism from the international community. But I don't see the United States, I don't see the United Nations, I don't see the EU, I don't see anybody stepping up and saying to Israel, you know, you did your part now, you stay back, you rest, we will take responsibility for demilitarizing a piece of God's earth which has been used to attack Israel from the moment, it's before the withdrawal from Gaza. And I'm wondering, when you talk among the diplomats that you have at the United Nations, in your mind, whom do you see as the agent for the demilitarization of Gaza?
There are many ideas being brought up, but the first thing that one has to do is make sure to prevent Hamas from rearming and refilling their arsenal. And I sit in the UN chamber and I hear people speaking about opening up the so-called blockade, while not mentioning the fact that this would bring about concrete, which we now know what has been used for, terror tunnel, bringing in all kinds of metal. We've been accused of not allowing those things into Gaza, of being cruel or whatever, while now we know what it is. So the first thing you have to make sure, and this can be done rather easily, nothing is easy in our area, but by controlling, not having the smuggling tunnel from Egypt, which is going on, by controlling the borders from Israel and from sea or wherever it comes. It cannot be done if the international community speaks about opening up the so-called, blockade of Gaza without having those inside. Now, what you are speaking about and who can do that, there are many ideas that are being brought up. I think it is early. I am doubtful that Israel would agree to the UN doing it, though we do have some UN presence in the border with Syria who are doing quite a good job, and others. It can be the European, it can be an international international agency. Those are the technical issue. The question is there the will of the world to stand up to the Hamas and tell them this must stop, you must demilitarize, a terror organization cannot continue to rule this piece of land. Okay. If the Palestinian Authority, if Abbas chooses to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, he also might be able to play a part.
Look, what we've seen is enormous criticism of the state of Israel by the world community. And I'm wondering the extent to which the kind of criticism that came out of the UN itself, condemning Israel, as if Israel went out of its way deliberately to fire on a UN school. And that was the charge made on American television. It was made by the American administration. It was made by the United Nations. In general, right now, during this ceasefire, what do you feel from your colleagues in the United Nations? The United Nations has been, of late, very an anti-Israel forum. At the moment, David, what's the mood of the UN as it affects Israel and going forward in an attempt to create a peaceful solution between Gaza and the state of Israel?
If you will allow me a little leeway on this question, because there are so many answers. The UN is made out of 193 countries. Much more than a majority of them are non-democratic. And what Israel is facing, for instance, in a debate yesterday, was 44 countries speaking. Out of them, 16 were Arab nations, 6 were Islamic organization nations. And if that is not enough, they have 3 groups, the Arab group and the Islamic group and the non-aligned movement, which chose to have as a chair Iran, no other, and all of them bashing Israel. And if one really listens to all of this, one would make a mistake of thinking that they are right. But in the UN, and I think your viewers should know that, we must realize that contrary to common wisdom, what everybody says is not necessarily correct, and we have to stand firm on what we believe. And we have many friends as well. They might be critical of this action by Israel or the other, but I think they have realized what Hamas is, and they realize that in order to find a real solution to the issue, we need international positive involvement, and we need to say no to terrorism.
Okay, I hope that what you are describing comes to pass. I think you are, by the way, I don't know this, you sound more optimistic than I am, but I would trust any optimism that you bring much more than, the kind of outside the room view that most Americans have as they watch television and talk to people in the street. Look, one of the other things that we hear now, and what I feel has happened, David, I want you to tell me whether you think I'm right. The moment the fighting stopped, the perspective changed in the American media. Instead of bashing Israel for harming and killing civilians and children, the discussion turned to, well, this was really Israel's fault. Israel has blockaded Gaza. Israel is still occupying the West Bank. And therefore, Hamas and the Palestinian people are only doing their best to throw off the yoke of Israeli oppression. And what do you expect from them? And although the war was tragic, it really was Israel's fault. So I want you to speak first to the reality of the blockade of Gaza and whether Israel is imprisoning the Palestinian community in Gaza.
Yesterday we marked Tisha B'Av, the National Day of Mourning and commemorating chain of Jewish tragedies, and for thousands of years. And though it is different, I think the American public and your viewers should always realize that Israel still has enemies, very cruel enemies that might be different from others, but their aim is for Israel to disappear. And what you have spoken about, and certainly in America, this is not the majority, far from it. The support of the American public and administration is robust and strong.
Absolutely.
But we see people who are thinking as you, and this is amazing to me. I mean, I was in Israel when all of this started. My 4 kids were in Israel during the whole conflict. The government was criticized for doing nothing while missiles kept on falling on Israel. We have no ill feeling toward the Palestinians in Gaza. We actually wanted Gaza to succeed. It was of our interest. We left Gaza. We uprooted the settlements. How many times have you heard this saying, it's all about the occupation, it's all about the settlements? We uprooted all of those settlements. Very painful ordeal. We left Gaza not to return, and Gaza is running after us with missiles. So it is, we agreed to every ceasefire, even when we knew that the tunnels are still there, and Hamas decided not to, and agreed today to a ceasefire they could have agreed to 3 weeks ago. How many casualties would have been saved by doing that?
You're absolutely right. David Roet, this is the first time you and I have spoken. You're a wonderful person. I would love to speak to you more. I appreciate the time you've given us, and I hope you'll let me call you again.
I would love to, and thank you for all you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Kol tuv v'hatzlacha. We'll talk soon.
Toda rabba, toda rabba.
B'vakasha.